Welcome to this explainer. Today we're taking a look at something absolutely incredible. We're going to explore how a simple, everyday hazelnut spread basically conquered the world and became one of our most beloved food brands. We're going to break down the history, the science, and the business behind this iconic product. Let's get right to it.
Think about it. How exactly did a product that was literally born out of extreme scarcity, strict wartime rationing, transform into this global symbol of modern indulgence? It's a massive curiosity gap, isn't it?
Okay, let's dive right into this, because today we're talking millions upon millions of jars sold worldwide. It's crazy to think about them just sitting there on supermarket shelves and breakfast tables globally. But to truly understand how it got so massive, we have to look back at its incredibly humble and honestly, very difficult beginnings.
Part 1. A post-war necessity. Italy after World War II.
So let's ground this story in post-World War II Italy, specifically a small town called Alba in the Piedmont region. Now, the economic conditions back then were just brutal. We're talking severe economic hardship, strict food rationing, and critical shortages across the board. For a small family business like Pietro Ferrero's bakery, this was an existential problem. Cocoa was incredibly expensive and honestly, almost impossible to get your hands on. You simply couldn't manufacture pure chocolate.
But, they say necessity is the mother of invention, right? Enter the Giandujot tradition. This was a historical, local Piedmontese custom where folks would take what little, precious chocolate they actually had and stretch it out. How? By mixing it with an ingredient they had in absolute abundance, local hazelnuts. So, Pietro Ferrero leaned directly into this old tradition to solve his very modern supply chain crisis.
Part 2. The birth of Nutella, from Giandujot to spread. Now, that initial problem-solving hazelnut paste didn't just magically become the creamy spread we know today overnight. Actually, right after the war, Pietro created this solid block called Giandujot that you literally had to slice with a knife. Fast forward to the early 1950s, and it evolved into a softer, more spreadable version known as SuperCrema. But the real game changer? That hit in 1964, when Pietro's son, Michele Ferrero, took the reins. He improved the formula, making it way more practical and appealing for everyday families. And 1964 wasn't just about tweaking the recipe. That was the year they introduced this brilliant new name, Nutella, alongside those iconic packaging designs we still recognize today. This distinct branding was absolutely crucial. It primed the product for a massive commercial launch, effectively taking a local bakery fix and turning it into a highly marketable brand.
Moving on to part 3, the science behind the spread, perfecting the recipe.
Now, what's really interesting here is the food engineering behind this product. It is highly calculated. There are 5 core ingredients that chemically and texturally define Nutella: hazelnuts, cocoa, palm oil, sugar, and milk. That specific combination? Yeah, that is anything but accidental. It's honestly a masterpiece of food engineering. From meticulous global ingredient sourcing down to the precise emulsification, flavor development, and nailing that perfectly creamy consistency. Ferrero essentially perfected the science of blending these specific elements together. The result is that highly addictive, distinct taste and texture, something competitors are literally still struggling to replicate today.
Part 4. Building a global empire, the marketing revolution.
Because having a great product, that's really only half the battle. The other half is the marketing revolution that scaled this company to unprecedented heights. Ferrero went all in on family-focused advertising. They heavily leveraged early television commercials, and they brilliantly used emotional branding. But their most crucial strategy by far was breakfast positioning. They didn't just sell this as a sweet dessert. No, they positioned it as a wholesome, essential breakfast ritual for families. It completely changed how consumers categorized the product in their minds. And their growth strategies were incredibly calculated. In Europe, they aggressively built local manufacturing networks in France, Germany, and the UK. Globally, they were super smart about adapting to vastly different local food cultures in places like the US, Brazil, and Japan. Whether it was being paired with traditional breads, local desserts, or even street food, they made it fit seamlessly. But all the while, Ferrero maintained strict product consistency. A jar in Tokyo tastes exactly like a jar in Paris. This massive global success with Nutella provided the financial and logistical foundation for something much, much bigger. It essentially allowed the family to diversify their portfolio into a full-blown global confectionery empire.
Nutella paved the way for Ferrero Rocher, Kinder, Tic Tac, and Raffaello. And amazingly, they did all of this while maintaining their core business philosophy and keeping it completely family-owned.
Which brings us to Part 5, Controversies in Modern Legacy, Modern Challenges.
Whenever a brand achieves true global dominance, it inevitably brings intense scrutiny, right? You have to navigate a really complex modern landscape. So on one hand, there are very real consumer and environmental debates. Things like concerns over the use of palm oil, deforestation, and serious discussions around high sugar content. On the other hand, Ferrero has responded by implementing large-scale sustainability projects and renewable energy initiatives. It's a classic example of modern global supply chain realities clashing with environmental consciousness, forcing a massive company to adapt.
Yet, despite those modern debates and some really heavy competition, the brand's customer base remains incredibly resilient. Why is that? Well, it's a pretty potent mix of consumer psychology. We're talking childhood nostalgia, unwavering product consistency across generations, deeply ingrained breakfast rituals, and decades of really effective emotional marketing. At the end of the day, it's not just about the sugar or the cocoa. It's about that emotional memory attached to just opening the jar.
Ultimately, Nutella represents far more than just a spread. It represents resilience, creativity, family entrepreneurship, and decades of innovation. When you really think about it, what you're spreading on your toast isn't just a recipe from a massive factory. It's the direct descendant of Pietro Ferrero's small post-war bakery in Alba, Italy, successfully scaled up to millions of breakfast tables today.
Extraordinary ideas often begin during our most difficult times. I mean, going from a post-war cocoa scarcity to a global empire, it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What current hardships today might be quietly sparking the next world-changing innovation? Thanks for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll catch you next time.